Hello and welcome. Today the topic is multiple sclerosis and Lyme disease the same thing? If we haven't met, my name is Pam Bartha and I'm the author of Become a Wellness Champion and the founder of Live Disease Free. I'm going to be presenting a very compelling case that really suggests that Lyme disease is a very big cause of multiple sclerosis. I first want to share something with you that is very strange. On the MS Society website, they used to have a page dedicated to explaining that multiple sclerosis and Lyme disease were different. So a lot of people are confused about this, and so they made a page that would really explain. And they said on that page, they said that number one, yes, multiple sclerosis, and this is the MS Society. This was a page that they had. MS and Lyme disease, they have many of the same symptoms. They also have the same results on MRIs and lumbar punctures, but they're different. Even though they look the same as far as symptoms and test results, they're different because if you're diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, antibiotics don't help. But if you have Lyme disease and you treat early, if you're catching the Lyme disease early, then antibiotics help. Well, that page disappeared off their website. I'm not sure. Maybe they moved it somewhere else. Maybe they revamped their website. I'm not sure. But for some reason, that information is not there anymore. And a lot of people are confused because, like some people that have MS, they get tested for Lyme disease, and it shows that they do have some of the antibody bands. They work with integrative doctors that are picking up Lyme disease. There's many different integrative practitioners that have linked MS and Lyme disease. There's over 100 years of research. We're going to talk a little bit about that. There's so much evidence that multiple sclerosis is probably caused by not just Lyme disease. MS is an infectious disease, and there are multiple parasites that are causing MS. It's not just one microbe that's causing the disease, but there are a few that are in the forefront. They're commonly found in MS, and they are some of the big culprits, I would say, that are causing MS. And we explain this like if you have a garden and you want to take care of your garden, you want to manage the weeds, you don't just have dandelions or thistles, you've got many different types of weeds. So today we're going to be talking about one of those pests, one of those weeds that are really common in multiple sclerosis, and that would be the spirochete bacteria that causes Lyme disease. So spirochete, you're going to hear me talking about that. Spirochete is like a corkscrew-shaped bacteria, and Borrelia is that bacteria that looks like a corkscrew. It has that shape, and that is the microbe that causes Lyme disease. And there's this huge, huge link. So it is definitely one of the infections that are heavily causing multiple sclerosis in a lot of people. Maybe not everyone, but in a lot of people. So again, if you're just joining, on the MS Society website, and I captured the quotes because they disappeared, but they were talking about, like, they're trying to get people to understand, like, no, MS and Lyme disease are different. Because if you have Lyme disease and MS, they both have this very, very similar, many of the same symptoms. They also show up as the same test results as far as lesions and lumbar puncture results as far as the antibody bands, but they're different because when you have MS and you take antibiotics, this is what they said on their website. If you have MS and you take antibiotics, it doesn't really help. But in the early stages of Lyme disease, then it can help treat the infection of Lyme. So they're saying that's the only difference, really. That's the biggest difference. But there's a big problem because they actually funded a study. They funded several studies, but this one in particular is that it's a 2017 study, and they showed that, so this was a multiple sclerosis they funded a clinical trial. So this is not just a small pilot study, it's a rigorous gold standard study. And they had 142 patients in it with early MS. So this is the clinically isolated syndrome where people have a MS diagnosis and they've had their first attack. Also 12 MS clinics across Canada, double-blind placebo-controlled study. So that really shows that it's a well-done study. It's something that you're not going to just dismiss. It was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. That's one of the world's most prestigious scientific journals or medical journals. And the researchers gave half of the patients antibiotics called minocycline, and the other half was a placebo. They followed them up for 6 months, monitoring them up to 2 years, and they found that patients who received the antibiotic were significantly less likely to develop clinically definite multiple sclerosis compared to those who got the placebo. So this is really big because, well, number one, we know that if we get bitten by a tick or mosquito, we're infected with Lyme. Antibiotics can help us in the acute stage of this infection. When we've been bitten, if we have chronic Lyme, we know that antibiotics don't work. So this study that was funded by the MS Society, they said that this antibiotic, if a person had just one MS flare and they were diagnosed with MS and they took the antibiotics at that point, that it actually, significantly less of them went on to develop multiple sclerosis in the future. That's really significant, right? So in one breath on their website, they're like, no, antibiotics don't help MS. But then in the other side, they published a study that said that antibiotics can be helpful, especially in the early stages of multiple sclerosis. Again, I'm not saying that we should all run out and go on minocycline. If you have chronic Lyme infections, it doesn't work either. The antibiotics don't work well at that point, right? It's very difficult to treat chronic infections. So this study was funded by the MS Society and again published in the New England Journal of Medicine. So that's a really significant study. Totally contradicts what they said. So then Again, on their website, they said that MS and Lyme disease look identical as far as symptoms and as far as test results. The only difference is that for Lyme disease, antibiotics work, and for multiple sclerosis, antibiotics don't work. And then they shared that study that antibiotics did help MS. So do antibiotics help multiple sclerosis or not? I believe that they do maybe in early stages if you have a Borrelia infection. But again, there are multiple parasites that can cause these MS symptoms. But these Lyme infections are really common in multiple sclerosis. They're very common. We're going to talk about more of the evidence about that. This research, they're not talking about it. This is really important research that we should be talking about and we should be discussing it. I will be creating a blog post. I always do every week. Go to livediseasefree.com. It's a library. It's a gold mine. It's helping you to understand why you're sick with the different types of infections that are commonly found in multiple sclerosis and how we treat them, how we recover, the diet that's really helpful to help us to get ready to treat. And I have talked about this study in 2017 and how this really contradicts what they have on their website. So I did that talk a long time ago, but I'm bringing this back because it's just unbelievable that nobody is talking about this. It's crazy. So in fact, researchers have been documenting these spirochetes in multiple sclerosis patients over 100 years now. If we go back to 1911, researchers first linked these spirochete bacteria, so this corkscrew-shaped bacteria that we call Lyme or Borrelia, and it's the bacteria that causes Lyme disease, that was already discovered in multiple sclerosis in 1911. Then through the 1920s and 30s, 40s, and 50s, study after study found these spirochetes in the brains and the spinal fluid of MS patients. So these are not fringe studies. These are peer-reviewed studies, and some of them found in journals like The Lancet, which is a very prestigious medical scientific journal. In 1957, this is really huge, almost 70 years ago, a researcher cultured spirochete bacteria in the spinal fluid of MS patients. And so her results, she found that at least 78% of the MS patients grew spirochetes, and 0% of healthy people had these spirochete bacteria. Incredible. And that was in the spinal fluid of MS patients. Almost 80%. And it's hard to grow this spirochete. She was able to grow them, and she found them in almost 80% of MS patients and in 0% of healthy patients. That's in 1957. Her work was highlighted in Time magazine, which again is a prestigious magazine. It's not a fringe magazine. So why has all of this research been buried? After spirochetes have been discovered in multiple sclerosis for nearly 50 years, did this research just stop and it was dropped? This finding of in 80% of somebody should have done other studies and proven her wrong or proven her right. And then later, Dr. Alan MacDonald, he actually found these spirochete he's a researcher, a pathologist that really has researched a lot about Borrelia and this bacteria. And he found Borrelia in the myelin sheath of Alzheimer's patients. So that's really interesting. Inside, and I've shared that on my masterclass training, you can actually see pictures of that. So he found this Borrelia bacteria in the myelin of Alzheimer's patients. So we know that Borrelia can infect the myelin sheath of nerve cells. He's shown that in pictures. It's proof, it's evidence. But he also found in MS patients, he found these little worms, and I've talked about that, these filarial worms. And in every MS subject he looked at, he found many of these small worms. Again, this is why I'm saying it's not just Borrelia. But these little worms were full, infested, loaded with this spirochete bacteria. So he was talking about how these worms, they're like a Trojan horse. They're bringing Borrelia into our central nervous system. Sure, we can get Borrelia into the central nervous system other ways, but this is definitely one way because the worms carry Borrelia, this bacteria, into the central nervous system, and they're found in the central nervous system of MS patients. Borrelia is found in MS because of those worms, and maybe other reasons too. So we know that Borrelia is in the central nervous system of MS. We know that Borrelia can and possibly enjoys infecting the myelin. So is it possible that what we've been told, that MS is just our immune system is attacking our tissue, our nerve tissue for no reason? Could it be that our immune system is actually just defending us from infections in the central nervous system? That's its primary job. That is common sense. That is what it does. It actually protects us and defends us from different types of infections in the central nervous system or throughout the body. Why do we just run to the theory that, our immune system has gone haywire, it's just attacking our tissue for no reason? It doesn't even make sense. So, spirochetes are found in the central nervous system of MS, thanks to the work of Dr. Alan MacDonald, and we know that spirochetes can infect the myelin. Maybe it's great nutrition there for it. Maybe it likes, different parasites like to live in different parts, but it's been shown on images that it infects the myelin sheath. So there you go. It's just, you just can't make this stuff up. It's absolutely crazy. So what does this mean? So again, for decades, we've been told that it's autoimmune, and it's not autoimmune. It's a chronic infection in our central nervous system. It's one of the chronic infections. We talked about the little worms. I won't talk about it here, but he also found tapeworm larvae and developing tapeworms in the central nervous system of MS patients. So we're talking about different types of worms. We're talking about this bacteria that causes Lyme disease. And that could be why that Borrelia is such a big part of multiple sclerosis. So this is what's causing the damage. It is not the immune system. We know that it's going to cause inflammation directly and indirectly. So his findings were so huge. He really deserves an award for that. There is other clinical evidence. So we've talked about the studies from 1911, the 20s, 30s, 40s, and then 1957, where they found Borrelia spirochetes. That one bacteriologist found it in almost 80% of the central nervous spinal fluid of MS patients. But then there's Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, and he's one of my mentors. He's an amazing doctor. He's been treating Lyme patients for many, many years. He has so much wisdom and understanding and knowledge from serving thousands of people all over the world. He's also trains doctors. Like I believe he's 80 years old or older, and he's still training doctors. He still has a practice. So Dr. Klinghardt is a physician, and he specializes in Lyme disease. And there's an old documentary, I'm sure you can find it online. It's called Under Our Skin. You can watch it for free. It's really fascinating. He made a statement that really should have shocked the medical world. He said, "We have never in the past 5 years found a single MS patient who did not test positive for Borrelia burgdorferi, not a single one." So when that video was made, he said, in the last 5 years of working with MS patients, we have not found a single MS patient that did not test positive for Borrelia burgdorferi, which is that spirochete bacteria that causes Lyme disease. That's huge. And then there's Dr. Richard Horowitz. He's treated thousands and thousands of Lyme patients. And back when he wrote the book, I think it was at least 12,000 Lyme patients he's treated. He's a very well-respected, again, physician. And he said that Lyme disease is the great mimicker or imitator. And because it mimics many diseases, especially multiple sclerosis. And there's a lot of commonalities with Lyme disease and MS, he said. The neuropathy, a lot of cognitive dysfunction, a lot of muscular, skeletal pain and fatigue. And he said he's also had a lot of success in treating people for Lyme and also MS with antibiotics. I believe he uses like combinations of antibiotics. So he is another doctor, and he has written several books on Lyme disease, and he talks about MS. And that's Dr. Horowitz, Horowitz. And Dr. Klinghardt is Klinghardt. He is an amazing doctor. Both of them are. So these are doctors that have been in their clinical practice treating Lyme disease, but also treating Lyme disease and multiple sclerosis and having incredible improvements, like just mind-blowing. And so like, why are we not looking in this area? So just to summarize again, we have all this historical evidence from 1911 to 1957, many peer-reviewed studies finding these spirochetes in the spinal fluid and central nervous system of MS patients. Then in 1957, that bacteriologist was able to grow spirochetes from the spinal fluid of at least 80% of patients, knowing that it's hard to grow these spirochetes. And then, so she published that in Time, or it was reported in Time magazine. And then more modern evidence, Borrelia found inside the brain of Alzheimer's patients, infecting the myelin sheath. So we know that it does infect the myelin sheath. And then Dr. Alan McDonald found worms in 100% of the MS subject he looked at. And in those worms, 100% of them were loaded with Borrelia. So again, significant clinical findings, and then Dr. Horowitz, I shared also his findings. So we have a huge amount of evidence that Borrelia is probably one of the common parasites that cause multiple sclerosis. And a parasite is any microbe that lives in your body and causes you harm. So it can be bacteria. It can also be protozoa, fungi, and worms. So, and remember, I shared that there are different worms involved. I've done many different talks on the different types of infections that have been linked to MS. Probably if you want to get a summary, my masterclass training will really summarize a lot of that for you. But again, remember that the MS Society, they kind of pulled this. Maybe they reorganized it. Maybe I just can't find it anymore. But that page where they had all of the trying to build a case like, oh, no, MS and Lyme disease are different. They're not the same. But then the reason they gave for it being different is it's contradictory to the very research that they've done. There's another big piece to this. Syphilis is a disease caused by a bacteria, another spirochetal bacteria like Borrelia that causes Lyme disease. There are different stages with syphilis. So we can have it in our blood, in our body, but in the neurosyphilis, it moves into the central nervous system. So that is a spirochetal bacteria that moves into the central nervous system. And it's the same, it's almost like a cousin to Borrelia. And scientists know that when that spirochete bacteria moves into the central nervous system of syphilis patients where they have neurosyphilis, they have symptoms identical to multiple sclerosis also. They can have severe headaches, they can have muscle weakness and spasticity, cognitive problems, confusion, dementia, vision problems, blindness, tremors, coordination problems, paralysis. And that's by a different bacteria that's related to Borrelia that causes Lyme disease. And it also gets into the central nervous system. So if they know this, why would they not? If you know that a certain bacteria can cause these neurological symptoms that are very similar, identical to multiple sclerosis, why wouldn't they look at the spinal fluid for Borrelia? Why wouldn't they study that? I mean, they do spinal taps. Why do they only look for the antibodies? They're only looking for the evidence of the immune system is fighting something, but we don't want to figure out what it's fighting. Oh, it's just your nerve tissue. Don't worry, it's just your nerve tissue. It's just gone haywire for no reason. It's so frustrating. So neurosyphilis and MS, exactly the same symptoms where that bacteria gets in the central nervous system. It's also a corkscrew-shaped bacteria related, similar to Borrelia. So we have so much evidence that Borrelia, or a bacteria that is corkscrew-shaped, that is very similar to Borrelia, or maybe it's a cousin, there's different species, that it is one of the main infections in multiple sclerosis. It is huge, like the evidence. We've got 100 years of studies. We've got clinicians that are treating. We've got even studies showing taking antibiotics early in multiple sclerosis, just like you have to treat Lyme disease early with antibiotics, right? If you don't treat Lyme disease early with antibiotics, it's really hard. Like chronic Lyme, it doesn't work very well with antibiotics. Same thing with MS. It doesn't work very well with antibiotics. So it's just kind of logical that one of the infections that causes MS is a spirochete like Borrelia. We know that syphilis causes demyelination in the central nervous system, and MS causes demyelination also. We also know that Borrelia is present in MS patients in their central nervous system. We know that antibiotics can help prevent the development of MS early on in the early stages. So if you have MS, you've had it for many years, it's not going to help. Because of number one, I don't believe that it penetrates to your brain very well either, the minocycline. And we also know that Lyme and MS look identical according to the MS Society. So is multiple sclerosis caused by Lyme disease? I don't know. All I can say is that when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, that was 28 years ago, I decided to take a different path. Because when I went to see the neurologist, I was told there was no hope for a cure. I would be completely disabled in time. I was devastated. I thought, how can you go from being a healthy person to having this mysterious thing taking over your body where you are going to be completely disabled in time? So I cried out to God. I begged for help. Very shortly after, my mother-in-law gave me a book on integrative health talking about a type of infection that could be causing MS. And that was talking about Candida. And I've talked about Candida in the past too. That's another infection. I decided to take a different path at that time. I decided not to follow standard of care because it gave me no hope for a cure. I would be completely disabled. I would not have been able to raise my family. I would not be a grandmother right now of 8. I don't even know if I would have been alive because I had such severe attacks. I lost all vision in my left eye, not a little bit, all vision in my left eye within a few days. I was flatlined on the couch. I had terrible fatigue. I had headaches like crazy. I couldn't sleep. And by the grace of God, I learned early on that MS is an infectious disease. It's been over 35 years now that I have been living MS-free. I've been studying and studying and studying, and we've really come up with what the research shows, what our students are passing, because I've had the amazing privilege now for over 20 years to support students in their recovery from parasitic infestations that cause MS and other diseases. And we're coming up to 10 years where we've been doing it in more of a formal group, our Live Disease-Free plan. And we're going to be celebrating big time next year because it's like 10 years. And we're going to be moving in different directions of supporting doctors, building up coaches. We have to get this message out. So what I'm sharing with you today is one of the infections that's really common, one of the parasites that's really common in multiple sclerosis. It's not the only one. And if you only treat Lyme, if you go to a Lyme-related doctor and you take antibiotics, you'll be very disappointed. We have to treat the big worms, the small worms, the bacteria like Borrelia, but also other bacteria, Clostridia. When we're really sick, we can have Clostridia. We can have different types of bacteria. And also, remember, Babesia travels with the Lyme infections, the co-infections. That's a protozoa. And Candida, which was the first one, and mold. So it's kind of like our microbiome is really weedy. It's really full of pests when we have chronic diseases like MS or other. And we have to knock back from big to small, and that is how we recover. So I've had students that come to me, they don't even have MS, but they had Lyme disease, and they've been working with Lyme-related doctors, and they're on antibiotics for months and months and months, and they're still sick and getting worse, having more symptoms, disability. They pass huge worms. People that have Lyme disease very often, in my experience, always, they pass, it can be 2-foot worms, 2.5-foot worms, infested. So Lyme disease is not just Borrelia or Babesia or Bartonella. It's dysbiosis. That's why we're showing the symptoms of Lyme disease. That is why we have problems of these spirochete bacteria, is because the garden inside, our microbiome is so out of balance. Our immune system is not dealing with, when we get these little worms, it's just like, sorry, I'm just overwhelmed. I can't handle it. And so in order to recover from this Borrelia spirochete, what we have found is following our system. You can watch my masterclass training. It goes into great detail. And if you need support, you can work with us. But first is we stop feeding the infections. They love carbohydrates and simple sugar. So we can't starve them to death, but we decrease the food to them. This really improves our symptoms tremendously. Then the next thing we do is we support the body. We're having daily bowel movements. We're sleeping well at night. So before we start treating, we're feeling a lot better. Then we start to treat from big to small. So the bacteria that are the spirochete bacteria, they are small. Same thing with Babesia, same thing with fungus. They're smaller than these large worms. So yes, the filarial worms are tiny, but our students are passing really large roundworms, tapeworms, flukes, like big. Like I have more than hundreds, probably 1,000 pictures by now at least of worms that our students are passing. And they're not just passing 1 or 2 worms, they're passing hundreds of worms. I love horses, and I'm getting back into horses, and I have a little colt. He's 4 months old. He's healthy. He's full of energy. He's not skinny. He's just built muscular. But you have to deworm your animals, right? So I dewormed him. 1 small dose of ivermectin, and I swear, and I had to mix it in with applesauce because I didn't know how else to get it in him, and he ate it really well. I'm like, gee, I hope he got it all. But he has passed at least 30 roundworms. And he looked healthy, and he looked strong, and he's muscular. And I don't even think we got all of them. We're definitely going to deworm them again. But so when we're really sick, like, think of it that way, is that our body is amazingly designed, I believe, by God. How can we still be alive if we have hundreds of worms? I don't know. That's why our body is so amazing. But when we are really sick, it is not just Borrelia. And we need to treat from big to small. So we, again, use the parasite drugs, we use oxygen therapies, we use herbs, and we're treating the worms and protozoa. Then we're knocking back fungus, and then we are treating these Lyme infections, right? Because if you still have the worms that are bringing Borrelia into your central nervous system, you're going to get reinfected with Borrelia, right? And if you still have a ton of big worms in your gut, they're going to weaken your immune system. And you're not going to be able to, if you get bit by a mosquito or a tick, your immune system is not going to clear the Borrelia. So it's really important to do an order from big to small over multiple cycles. And we have found that I'm not against antibiotics. I just know that one of the big reasons why I became sick was I was on too many antibiotics in the past. So they do save your life. They are important in a crisis intervention. But I don't believe that our healthcare professionals really understood how the antibiotics have devastated our microbiome. And there hasn't been enough attention into replenishing our health-promoting microbes. So a lot of us, we were like sitting ducks for whatever parasites were in our environment. And so it's really important that when we're treating, like what we have found with treating Borrelia and Babesia, that the herbs can be really helpful. But it's only when you are doing all the other work. Then if you treat the big parasites, then you can actually start to recover from the small ones, the Borrelia, the Babesia, the Bartonella, and other bacteria. Again, we really like liposomal herbs and herbs mixtures. They are quite amazingly helpful. Some of them will cross the blood-brain barrier, especially if you make it liposomal. Not all of it will, but a percentage will. And maybe antibiotic use will get better in time where we can treat these chronic infections. But if you just start with treating Borrelia, you will be very disappointed. If you have Lyme disease, if you have multiple sclerosis, if you have another neurological disease and you really suspect these Lyme infections, if you focus on Lyme, you're never going to get well because there's an underlying dysbiosis. There's an underlying weedy garden with lots of pests especially in your gut, which is almost 30 feet long. It's almost the size of a double tennis court, the surface area of a double tennis court. You can imagine you can fit a lot of parasites in that area. If you actually understand, look at more like you've got a weedy garden and you need to knock back the big worms that actually can cause a lot of neurological symptoms also that maybe we mistake for Lyme, but really treating big to small, definitely treating Borrelia. But then once it's chronic Borrelia, chronic Lyme, then the herbs can be really helpful. Or maybe then your practitioner is going to help you with antibiotics and then it will be working better. But again, the antibiotics, there's lots of issues with them. They're not really super helpful. Maybe in time we'll find better ways, but don't just focus on Borrelia. You will not have the quality of life that you want. The biggest cause of toxins in your body, there's environmental toxins we have to deal with, but the biggest cause of toxins in your body are coming from all of these parasites, right? So keep that in mind. So I'm going to let you guys go. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I'll be back next week. I'll be talking about the link between multiple sclerosis and this protozoa. It's really huge. It's as huge as the Lyme. And it is a really big part of people that have not just MS, but other chronic diseases. that have similar symptoms to multiple sclerosis. And if you enjoy these talks, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of research on my part. If you want us to help change this world, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. If you do that, it's going to get in front of more eyeballs. Maybe we can get some people, talking more about it and really demanding change. We want change. That's the big thing. And if you're at that place where like, Pam, I've been following you for a while. Thank you so much for everything, but I need to treat. I can't stand one more day having these parasites in my body. Watch my masterclass training. And if you would like to work with us, we have an amazing proven plan. That's how the wellness champions have been recovering from parasitic infestations that cause MS and other diseases. Be honored to support you. So just watch that. You'll learn all the steps that we take. And if you want our support, then make sure to fill out the form, book a time to chat with me, and make sure it's a good fit for you. So otherwise, have a wonderful week. We will talk to you next week. Take care and bye-bye for now.